Good afternoon. You're in for a special treat this afternoon. In 2012, Becky Powell experienced a tragedy that none of us can even imagine. And the story that Becky has told through the publication of her book, Awful Beautiful Life, is a story of redemption. It's a story of working through grief. It's a story of character. It's a story of integrity. It's a story of a tragedy turned into a very redemptive act that affected scores and scores of people and was a witness to the impact of God's grace. We had this plan, this event planned just as COVID hit in 2020. And so you should count yourself fortunate because you get to hear Becky and my two friends, Bill and Monty, share a wonderful story. I want to introduce them very briefly. I'm going to leave Becky more or less to be introduced by Bill and by Monty, but my two friends, both Baylor lawyers, so this is Monty James. Monty is of Consul of Jackson Walker. He is a very accomplished trial lawyer. He has, throughout his career, been in front of jury after jury after jury representing Fortune 500 companies. You will find out today that at the time of the tragedy that unfolded in the Powell family that he did not know Becky and the family well, but I'm going to leave it to them to share how together they became the closest of friends. Bill Jones, Bill, also a Baylor lawyer. Bill has had a distinguished career. Bill has, in other capacities, served as general counsel to the governor of Texas. He is chair emeritus of the A&M Board of Regents. How many Aggies do we have in here? All right, yeah, we always got to let our Aggies do that thing that they do. But Bill has had, as has Monty, a very distinguished career as a trial lawyer. He principally now is involved in governmental relations in Austin in his own firm. These two gentlemen, both Baylor lawyers, came together in the midst of this tragedy. They had been friends, but they did not have to do what they did and what they will share today. They could have walked away. They could have never become involved because of the gravity and the complexity of what was involved. However, you know that at Baylor Law School, we tell you, what do lawyers do? Lawyers serve. Lawyers help people solve problems that are affecting them. Lawyers, through their service, get from here to there. Right outside here on the wall, we have Micah 6:8, and what doth the Lord require thee but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. These two gentlemen as Baylor lawyers, they are epitomes of that verse. And with that, I'm going to turn it over, first of all, to Monty, and I will begin with the observation I made. You're in for a treat. You're in for a telling of a story that you're not going to forget and that I hope that remains with you as you go forth in your legal studies here at Baylor Law and into service in the profession. Monty?
Thank you, Dean Tobin. I'm just going to first introduce my good friend and former client, my favorite former client, Miss Becky Powell. Becky was born in Maryland but came to Texas as soon as she could. She went to several Southwest Conference schools that we cannot talk about today because of the conference conflict that we're all experiencing. But she is a Baylor alumnus by choice, and she's a wonderful client. She has 3 adult children. 2 are Baylor graduates, and 1 is currently a Baylor student, John Luke. And she is a commercial insurance broker in Austin. I just want to give one preference before we start, and that is this. Becky waived the attorney-client privilege to both write this book and for us to speak today. if you're sitting out there and I don't know how far along you guys are, you might wonder how in the world they're coughing up all these secrets about our representation and what we did and so forth. But Becky waived the attorney-client privilege to write the book and to speak today. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Becky to kick us off.
Is this on? Great. Well, you've met Monty and Bill, and they are 2 of the 10 attorneys that we would hire to work on my case. Bill and Monty, along with Johnny Sutton, former U.S. attorney, now criminal attorney, were my inner circle that I affectionately dubbed my 3 wise men. They're going to kill me for showing you that picture, but part of my story is they were more than just my attorneys. They were also there for me personally. They were my friends, and a few times let me have a laugh at their expense. I'll take that off so they don't get too mad at me. However, even though I was paying them, they tried to boss me around. But the best part of my 3 wise men was they were not only incredibly wise counsel, they were godly men. On May 16th, 2013, my husband Mark called me and told me he had done something terrible. He told me he loved me and the children, and he had left a folder for me in the top of my closet, and I was to follow the instructions exactly. My last conversation with my husband of almost 23 years lasted less than 2 minutes. Mark hung up when I asked him why Monty's wife was coming to our front door. Within a few hours, I would learn that Mark had taken his life, and I was a single mom and widow. My life changed in an instant, but who knew a few hours later it could get a whole lot worse? I found myself going to the closet to retrieve the folder Mark left with Monty and Bill, who would not enter for legal reasons until I paid them a retainer fee. I should have known this was not a good sign, since Mark had called Monty before he called me to tell him about the situation and ask him to take care of me and the children. The folder revealed a list of our assets and liabilities, including $15 million of life insurance, a folder from a funeral home that he had visited, a copy of his employer's insurance policy against employee fraud, and a list of 90 creditors whom we owed almost $22 million that I knew nothing about, and a note saying not to use the life insurance money to pay the creditors back. Bill saw the list of people and said, "This is going to be a bloodbath." The list was a list of the who's who of Texas businessmen. By the next morning, the FBI, Department of Justice, and Securities and Exchange Commission were already calling. Unbeknownst to me, Monty had already hired and retained Johnny Sutton. This began what they told me would be a minimum of 3 to 4 years of lawsuits and litigation. Nothing could have prepared me for those moments or what would happen over the next few months. I knew I needed God and He would play a big role, but who knew country music would too? I loved country music so much. My book, Awful Beautiful Life, and all the chapter titles are named after songs or lyrics from this genre. And since this is an ethics class, I thought I'd share with you one of those lines from a song by Aaron Tippin that reminded me of what I needed to do. Aaron Tippin's song says, "Never compromise what's right and uphold our family name. You've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything." These words helped influence everything I did. I would not keep the insurance money. It felt dirty to me. Instead, I would use that money to pay everybody back. I was also not going to allow myself or my children to have the mindset that we were victims. It was twofold, but became one force: protect my children and pay the creditors back. These two go hand in hand, not only because I needed to do the right thing, but I needed to stand for something within our family. I needed to set an example to my children of redefining success. There is nothing wrong with financial success if it's not your end goal. I wanted my children to know it was more important to be honest and kind than to have a big bank balance. I needed to be able to say that we had paid for our lifestyle, not the creditors, most of whom were our friends. I needed to know we owned our memories, that we had paid for every trip, for every donation, and every gift. And I love shoes and have a lot of them, and I needed to know that I paid for them and not my friends. The meetings begin. My days went from being a stay-at-home mom to daily meetings with my attorneys. I did not fully understand the situation at the time or how many issues we really had to deal with. The things attorneys can come up with. Early on, Monty and Bill started scheduling our meetings over lunch. I thought they did it because they didn't think I was eating, but I realized pretty quick it was easier for them to play the good cop, bad cop routine and deliver the bad news for the day in public. After months and months of these lunch meetings, I thought most of the decisions had been made, and once we received the funds from the life insurance and sale of our home, I would be able to write checks, and that would be the end of the story. Not even close. I guess I should have known it would not be that easy with so many three-letter government agencies involved, 90 creditors, and the 36 attorneys that represented them, Mark's employers, lawyers, and my 10 attorneys. Speaking of those three-letter agencies, did I mention the IRS? I'm sure you can imagine, with almost $22 million in play, they would get involved. So, with 3 open investigations from the FBI, SEC, and DOJ, my team had their hands full with countless problems and concerns. I'm going to tell you about a few of the problems that transpired. The life insurance alone had multiple problems. The justice of the peace went missing, and she had to sign the official death certificate in order for us to collect the life insurance money, if the life insurance money would even pay out. Since I made the decision not to keep the life insurance money or the proceeds from the sale of our house, which in the state of Texas were legally ours, Monty started receiving phone calls from friends telling him not to let me give the money away, which led to one of my favorite references in his billing statement, 5/29/13. Meeting with Bill and Becky. Specifically, we readdressed the issue of giving away all of our assets, including those that may be fully exempt from creditors. We discussed the issue at length on Monday, Memorial Day, and Becky was adamant this was her decision. We called her into the office today so that we could address it personally, as friends felt we should not do that. Becky said she appreciated their opinions very much. However, it was fully her decision and that she understood there was some possibility of keeping some of the money. But she didn't feel right about keeping the money given the amounts taken by Mark. And she was fully cognizant and unemotional in her decision to let it go. And I'm so glad Monty thought I was cognizant then. I'm not sure he did the entire time or now. But the life insurance not only belonged to me, it belonged to my children. And they would have to give their rights up as well. Madison and Boone were legal adults, 20 and 18, and they both, without a second thought, willingly signed documents giving up the rights to the money so we could use it to pay back the creditors. John Luke was 12 at the time and had been appointed a court ad litem because he was not a legal adult. The ad litem had to talk to John Luke without me present. He told him I was giving away all of his money to pay back the creditors, and was that okay with him? The ad litem told me after their conversation that John Luke was an incredible young man. He said he knew exactly what he was doing, and he did not even hesitate to give away the rights to his money. Next, creditors were filing lawsuits against me. ABC Bank filed lawsuits against Invesco. Invesco filed a lawsuit against me. We had to ask some creditors not to file lawsuits against Invesco. The issue of clawbacks surfaced. Lingering tax issues needed to be discussed. I needed to sell the house, but it had to be approved by the court. How do we handle the media? The SEC subpoenaed me and Invesco for Mark's personal records, files, and briefcase. Invesco, in conjunction with the SEC, started the forensic counting process. Would we have access to their information? Jerry Jones, one of the probate attorneys, decided we should put the estate into a dependent administration and place a bond on me to put the creditors' minds at ease, knowing I wouldn't have access to the money and would run off. The settlement agreement was extremely complex and took over 6 months to write. It is definitely one for the law books. I don't have the times or word to tell you how many complicated issues we had. The situation of those 18 months were overwhelming and gut-wrenching. One day I was asked, "How did you do it? How did you get through it?" And I said, lots of F words. Faith, family, friends, and fun. And if I'm honest, a few of the 4-letter ones slipped out here and there. Little did I know those F words would shape my journey. I could not have survived without my faith, my family, and my friends. It's the most difficult ordeal I've ever faced, but I would be remiss if I did not share my biggest takeaway. God was there all along our journey. And it was evident to me in the miracle ending of our story. Shortly after Mark's death, 25 FBI, SEC, and Department of Justice agents searched our house, taking computers and files. From all of the evidence they gathered, it was so evident that I had no idea the FBI never even interviewed me. And eventually, all 3 investigations were closed. But the best part of the miracle occurred only 18 months later. We paid every creditor back 100% of their principal investment, totaling $21.6 million. The Department of Justice said they did not know of another case where creditors got paid back 100% of their principal investment, and that the typical return was 10 cents on the dollar. So, as you can see, we had lots of issues to deal with, and I think Monty and Bill will now go into more detail about some of the issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Today, I'm on the tail end of my legal career, but in May of 2013, I was a very busy equity partner at Jackson Walker's Austin office. And I knew Mark Powell, but I didn't know him very well. We weren't close friends, but I did know him. I'd known him for a couple of years. And one morning in May of 2013, I received an email from Mark, and he said, "Monty," I'm paraphrasing, but "Monty, I have an employee theft issue that I would like to talk to you about. Are you available this afternoon?" And I replied, and I said, "Sure, that's fine. I'm here all afternoon. Just call." Later in the afternoon, I received another email from him from Mark, and he said that he was running late that day. Could he please have my cell phone in case he needed to call me after hours? And so I gave him my cell phone via email. We had a partner meeting that day beginning at 5 o'clock on a different floor in our building. And literally, I was walking down to that partner meeting, about to go down the stairs when my cell phone rang, and I had it with me just in case Mark called. And I looked down, and I could tell it was Mark Powell calling me. So I stopped, and I answered the phone, and I was about to tell him I had a partner meeting. Could I call him back? And Mark said to me, Monty, I've done some very bad things. I've taken tens of millions of dollars. The people want it back. And if anything happens to me, will you please represent my family and take care of them? I love Bader Law School. Dean Tobin knows I love Bader Law School. Bader Law School gave me a great opportunity in life, and I love Bader Law School. And I guess Bill and I would probably say Bader Law School prepared us for this, at least indirectly. But I can assure you, you're not going to experience anything at Bader Law School that would prepare you for a phone call like that. When he said the statement, if anything happens to me, we represent my family, of course, I clicked into a different gear immediately. I had walked, unfortunately, back to my office. And in my area of the law firm, it was all partners. And I've already told you, we had a partner meeting at 5 o'clock. They were all downstairs. I was at my desk, and my cell phone was about to die. I had to have it plugged in because it was just out of gas. So I was afraid to leave. I had him on the phone, and I wanted to keep him on the phone. Obviously, I went into the mode of trying to save his life. In the process of talking to Mark and trying to save his life, I was also on my office phone calling 911, trying to get to the police. Believe it or not, we had a brand new phone system, and we could not dial 911. I was the first one that tried to do it, and it didn't work. I couldn't call the police. An associate walked by, and I was talking on the phone, and I had a pen in my hand, and I threw it out the door, and unfortunately, it went sailing right behind his head and hit the carpet, and it didn't catch his attention. I couldn't leave, and I was, so that's the situation that I was faced with. I lied to Mark that day and told him that I'd represented someone in a similar situation and we could get him out of it. Just let me help him. He told me when I made that comment that he was going to call his best friend and his wife. I asked him, I was trying to keep him on the phone. I stopped him and I said, have you told anyone else? And he said, you're the first person that I've told. And I got a commitment from Mark for him to call me back after he talked to his best friend and his wife, and I promised him that we could guide him through this and to not do anything. And that was the last time that I talked to him. When he hung up, I dialed 911 on my cell phone, and I reached the police, and I told them I was fearful that I had a suicide situation and I needed help immediately, and they wanted to know the facts, and I told them I couldn't tell them the facts. Remember, I'm a lawyer, and somebody just told me about a major crime, and there's an attorney-client privilege there, so I was trying not to tell them that, but to tell them this is imminent, and they were asking me questions. They were asking me, did he say he was going to kill himself? Well, he didn't. I said no, but I could tell from what he told me that that's what we were dealing with. Anyway, I hung up from there. And there was a flurry of activity, and there's too much detail to tell you there. The police came to my office. The police wanted to interview me, and Bill later that evening was in contact with the Department of Public Safety, trying to get someone to find Mark, and it was a very, very tenuous, tough situation. Mark ultimately took his life. And one of the first things we had to deal with was who me and my law firm were going to represent. And Becky wanted us to represent her and her 3 children. And that was just an impossibility. The kids had a real shot at the money that was left from the life insurance. And Becky had a real shot at some of it, but not as much as the kids. And so I couldn't do both. That's just one of the ethical issues that we'll talk about. Bill's going to talk a little bit, and then we'll both address some of the ethical dilemmas that we were confronted with during the course of our representation.
About this time, I get a call from my friend, Becky. She's not a client, she's a friend. My wife and I had an annual Christmas dinner with Becky and Mark every December. And she said, Bill, get over here right now. Something is up. I can't find Mark. And so, having worked for Governor Perry as his first general counsel when he took over for President George W. Bush, I reached out to Colonel McGraw and said, hey, I need some help. We need to find a friend. Much like Monty, I learned a lot at Baylor Law School. I was taught a lot by Professor Muldrow, Professor Dean Tobin, Mad Dog Dawson, who I passed his figure back there in the hallway, and I got shivers down my spine because Mad Dog Dawson taught me how to cross-examine a witness one afternoon. I was supposed to have a short trial for practice court, 30 minutes or less. 3.5 hours later, I was still getting it right, or trying to get it right for Mad Dog Dawson on how to cross-examine a witness. So I learned a lot at Baylor Law School. But Baylor Law School didn't have a class at that time for what happens when your friend calls you to find her husband, and all that's going to follow after that. I hightailed it over to Becky's house. I walk in. I can see the stress on her face. She's on the phone. She's trying to get people. There are 2 police officers standing at her front door. We don't know what's happening next. And Baylor Law School also didn't prepare me for, it did prepare me, but we didn't get to go over it in class, of what happens when you get the phone call from the DPS official that says, the man you're looking for, we found, and he's dead. So I had to go in and tell Becky about Mark. And I will never forget the reaction. I won't go into all the details, but there is a certain groan that comes from a body when there's a death or when there's a loss. And it sounds like something that I can't really describe. It's not something I've ever heard before. But the picture in your mind is the groan of torture, of death and torture. And that's what I heard from Becky before she fainted, and we had to take her in the bedroom. Several hours later, Monty is there, and we're now having to deal with not just a friend and the children and family and whatnot, but now we're having to deal with something else. And so I want to read to you from the book what happened later that evening, night, in Becky's bedroom in this conversation. Mark had said, I've left a folder for you in your closet on the top shelf. You need to follow the instructions exactly. I reached for Bill's hand, that's me, tugging him to my bathroom through which we would reach my closet. Monty followed, and both stopped at the door. That's that Baylor training. You know what happened then? Baylor law training kicked in. Wait, hold it. We can't go in there and read this stuff. We got attorney-client privilege stuff to do and take care of before we go in there. Bill pulled me back. We can't go in there, Becky. You need to hire us. If you don't, we can't see that file and help you. Help me? Bill lowered his voice as if talking to a small child. Pay us something. Hire us as your legal counsel. Monty looked at Bill, then to me. Mark called me, Becky, but this is your decision. You don't know me as well as you know Bill. You don't have to hire me. Monty and I had met only a couple of times. Bill had been a close friend for years, a close friend to Mark and to me. He was also a close friend of Monty's, and that was good enough for me. I grabbed $200 bills from my underwear drawer, I don't know why she had $200 bills in her underwear. I don't know. There's some explaining to do there. I don't know. Monty pressed it back into my hands. Becky, give me a 20. You will need the money. With $20 each, the lowest retainer I've ever gotten, I hired Bill Jones and Monty James as my personal attorneys for what I had no idea. Then we pulled down the file. It was 3 inches thick, and it contained everything. So in that moment, there were so many ethical issues that were running through my brain, I couldn't even comprehend them all. We pulled out the file, we look at it, I look at the list of people on the file, I know a lot of people on that list, and I see the amount of money that they're owed. And that's when I told Becky, this is gonna be a bloodbath. I mean, I'm a litigator, former litigator. I don't do litigation now, but I've litigated cases. I've represented banks. I've tried cases for banks. This is going to be a bloodbath. And some of these people are not people you jack around with. They don't play. They're going to want their money, and they're going to want it now, and they're not going to care where they get it from. So we had to start kicking in things at that moment. But here's the one thing that helped us throughout this entire process, and by the way, it brought up a number of ethical issues. Becky said in that moment, because she's looking through the file, she sees the insurance amounts, and she goes, well, we're going to pay everybody back. And we kind of patted her on the head like she was a little child and said, Becky, that's not going to happen, but that's so sweet. She goes, no, we're going to pay everybody back. And that was the driving force behind everything we did from that point on. Those were the client's instructions, pay everybody back. Now, your typical client in that situation will probably not tell you that. That is not typical. Your typical client in that situation goes, well, what do we do? What can we do? How much can we get? What can we set aside? What amount, what does the law allow us to take? Can the creditors reach the insurance money or not? This client had one focus and one focus only, pay everybody back. That raises a number of ethical issues. Well, what about the client? What about her children? How were they going to live? Mark was the only breadwinner for the family. And as a lawyer, aren't you supposed to represent the interests of your client and protect them and make sure that they're covered? And as a lawyer representing someone who's in this situation, you might have to kind of bend them a little bit, because even Becky, with her idea, at some point you got to maybe talk them down from that. But you have to understand the issues that your client is dealing with and what it is your client needs. And in that moment, and for every moment thereafter until everybody was paid back, Becky's number one need was to get everybody paid. Even to the sacrifice of her and the children. Why? You have to understand why this is a driving force for us, because we're going to go into some other specifics of what we had to deal with. And you need to understand, why was that so important to her? Well, she didn't have somebody to go to the grocery store for. Well, she did. Some friends went to the grocery store. She had friends. By the way, she's got some awesome friends. Read the book. My goodness, people were doing stuff for her Monty and I didn't even know about. They were doing unbelievable things to help pull up this family and take care of this family. But what Becky was interested in is when she went to the grocery store, she didn't want to have to duck down behind the pineapple aisle whenever somebody walked around the corner that she owed money to. When one of her children went to class here at Baylor, she didn't want somebody's child who's also going to school at Baylor that they owed money to snip a little, say, well, you know who that is. All right? That was the driving force behind every decision she made. But she had one little problem. We had no freaking idea how many creditors there were or how much money they were owed. We had Mark's list. And this man and I spent the entire weekend working that list, taking phone calls. I knew some people on that list, and I knew they were I knew they could be not nice. And I started calling them, say, hey, she wants to pay everybody back. Just everybody stand down. She wants to pay you back. I just want to see. And what I found is that these creditors fell into three categories. There was a category of friends who said, that money situation was between me and Mark. Becky had nothing to do with it. The kid had nothing to do with it. That's on me. You take care of Becky and the kids. First and foremost, you take care of Becky and the kids. There was another group of creditors who were not so nice. And they said, where's my money? I need that money. I don't have extra money like that to throw about. And I don't care about Becky and the kids. I want my money. And some of them filed suit within a week. Within a week. And then there was a third group of creditors who might not have known Becky and the kids that well and said, well, I kind of need my money. I mean, I'm interested in humanity, and so I don't want to be mean, but I do kind of need my money. It's a lot. And so we had to come up with some sort of a plan to handle the onslaught that we knew was coming. We knew it was coming. What we didn't know is how much money we had. We didn't know if the insurance policies would pay at all. We didn't know about because of the circumstances of the death. We didn't know whether any of the insurance policies had been pledged as collateral. Turns out, 5 million had been. We didn't know exactly how many creditors there were because we found out from Mark's list it wasn't exactly complete. There were people left out. And so we went for the next several weeks and months not knowing. And then there's Invesco, the company that Mark worked for. Monty and I made a call to them, one of the first calls we made. And you talking about getting a steely and cold reception. They didn't have much to say to us. And the reason we wanted to reach out to them is to let them know, look, this is not Bernie Madoff's wife. This woman wants to pay everybody back. We have 15 million in insurance policies. We got a house that's worth something. We got a few other things that we can sell. Just work with us. We can do this. They said nada. Not one thing. Literally, on the phone call. He made the phone call. We all get on. We're from Texas. We're cordial. How are y'all doing? Fine. Okay. On to the issues. They were cold to us. And we had to work through that. So what we decided to do, knowing that some of the creditors were lawyering up, one day I said, hey guys, Becky is trying to do the right thing. Word is leaking out that Becky is trying to do the right thing. I've contacted the creditors that I know and told her that Becky is trying to do the right thing. But some of these people don't really know that and know her. Why don't we get everybody in the room? They're all calling each other. They're all trying to figure out what's going on. Why don't we pull everybody together in an informal creditors meeting? We were preparing for bankruptcy because we knew she didn't have enough money to pay everybody, at least at that time. So we had a bankruptcy lawyer on staff. But we hadn't filed. And a creditors meeting is an official bankruptcy proceeding thing. But I like the idea. I said, why don't we just pull them all in a room and talk to them? So we did. We called a creditors meeting in Monty's office. And all of the creditors showed up or sent representatives, sent their lawyers or whatnot. And in that creditors meeting, we laid it all out. We laid all of our cards on the table. And we told them what we knew. We told them what we didn't know. We told them what Becky wanted to do. And we told them what she was willing to sacrifice. And we asked them to do something unprecedented. We asked them to stand down. Keep in mind, some of them had already pulled out their guns and had aimed it at Becky's head. We already had a lawsuit on file. We already had a bank that had sued Invesco. We already had a couple of pistols out. And I came in, and Monty, and we said, if everybody will stand down, whatever money is available, whatever money we can get from insurance, whatever money we can get from the sale of the house, we will give to you. And you won't even have to fight for it. You can save your money on attorney's fees. In fact, you don't even have to hire an attorney. Stand down, we'll get you paid. Now, to ask someone to do that means Monty and I had to ask them to trust us and to trust Becky. If you are an unethical lawyer and you have conducted your affairs up to that point as an unethical lawyer, and if you have conducted yourself in the legal field as someone who cannot be trusted, you cannot represent that client in that situation, because there's not a lawyer or a person in an audience that will believe you. But Monty and I had conducted our affairs long before this issue arose. And we had some semblance of integrity and trust that we could offer that day. And I'm going to leave with this. We'll get back into some of the details of the creditors meeting later, and you probably have some questions. There will come a time in your legal career when you will be offered to do something unethical. A client will ask you to do something unethical. It will be expeditious for you to do something unethical. Don't do it. You only get one law license. I assure you, Dean Tobin is not going to let you cycle back through. You blow it, he ain't going to let you come back through. Everything you do, every client you represent, every case you try, every document you draft, everything you do it to represent your client, but you do it ethically so that you can be trusted. And with that, I'll turn it over to Monty.
Ditto on everything Bill just said to you. It's so very important. Probably part of the reason Bill and I had such a cold reception from Invesco or Atlantic Trust that morning, that next week, was because there was already a criminal investigation open. That night, as I was telling you just a little bit ago, when the police came to my office, we were still trying to find Mark, and I was on the phone constantly with the police and with Bill, with people at Becky's house, with Mark's pastor, with anybody we could think of to try to find Mark. The police came to my office, and they wanted to know what Mark had told me, and I wouldn't tell them. Kind of irritated them. They told me that there was an open investigation, and a homicide detective wanted to meet with me the next morning. So we were preparing for that. So the FBI was involved in it almost immediately. And I went, and I had a good friend, and we hired that person for Becky from a criminal standpoint. And I'll never forget, in my office, Bill and I called Becky in to tell her that we've hired Johnny Sutton to represent her criminally. And she just broke down, you know. I mean, I just broke down, bawling as to why, you know, we would need a criminal lawyer on top of everything that we were doing. And Bill told her, she said, I didn't know anything. I didn't do anything. And Bill told her, they don't care, Becky. He probably shouldn't have made it quite so blunt, but that's what he told her. And that's the truth, you know. So anyway, there were immediate criminal issues. Those criminal issues were resolved, I'm happy to tell you. The FBI investigated Becky. They took every iPhone, every computer. They had all of my text messages to Becky. They had all of my emails to Becky. They had all of my voice messages to Becky. They had all the bills, same stuff, had all that stuff. And they went through that. I think 28 federal agents came to our house one day to take all this stuff. And they went through it for a time, for 8 months, I think, or close to it. And they completely exonerated her. She didn't know anything about it. So that part of it turned out good. We had to turn our attention now to how we resolve this. And Bill has told you about the creditors. I'm not going to retread that. We still had some lawsuits, but the creditors, and some of them were difficult, and a lot were not. But we had a looming IRS problem. My goodness, did we have an IRS problem. You see, if anyone had proven that this was a Ponzi scheme as opposed to simple loans, then all of that money that came in when a loan was made was income for that year. And we were talking about tens of millions of dollars. Tens of millions of dollars. So the potential for the IRS and the taxes owed was just astronomical. have wrecked all of this. And the IRS, as you probably already know, even though you're law students, has priority over just about everything. And so Bill and I aren't tax lawyers. And we set out and asked colleagues, and I asked partners, who could we get to be, a world-class tax attorney to help us with this with the IRS. And we were recommended, we had 3 different people refer us to the same person, out of town, but a stellar reputation, and we hired them. After he knew the facts, he told us that if we disclose this to the Internal Revenue Service in writing, and then waited 18 months after that disclosure date, that we could pay the creditors back, and the IRS could not come in and take the money back from the creditors. You see, there's this thing under the law, and I don't know if you'll study it here or not, but it's called transferee liability. And in essence, that means that if Becky paid these creditors back the money that they had loaned, and the IRS decided this was a Ponzi scheme, the IRS could come to those creditors and take the money back. They could do that, had the ability to do it. So anyway, our tax advice was that if we waited 18 months, we could pay the creditors back, and the IRS couldn't come after the creditors, so we were in business. On October 15th, 2013, we filed that tax return, and on that tax return, that tax attorney wrote the disclosure that there were a number of creditors, in the tens of creditors, some of whom claimed that these were not loans, but was a fraudulent scheme. We dispute that, and we gave them notice, the notice we needed to give. We have a creditor meeting, and Bill and I have to tell the creditors that we've got your money. The insurance policy began paying off, and of course the money went into the registry of the court as protected. But we started getting big chunks of money and compiling that money. But we had to, and creditors, didn't. Bill and I do have good reputations, but not everybody trusted us. People would hear this and they would say, "Yeah, sure, I'm going to get 100 cents of my money back in a situation like this." There was that sentiment out there for sure. In any event, we told these creditors we cannot pay you the money until May of 2015. That's 18 months after October of 2013. So that the IRS cannot come to you and take it back from you. Well, that didn't settle well with all of the creditors. A lot of them didn't understand it fully. They didn't fully trust. They would say they would trust us, but we're adversaries, right? But they were kind of plodding along, and so we told them that. We told them that in writing. We told them 18 months, no transferee liability. It gets to the summer of 2014, and we don't have time for me to unravel what transpired fully. I wish that I could, but I cannot. But we learned that the tax advice that we had received was not accurate, and that transferee liability did not go away at 18 months. In fact, transferee liability really never went away with respect to the IRS. The IRS could always come in. And so we have this ethical dilemma as to what we do. We have now told people orally in 2 different meetings, I'm talking about we'd have 75 people at these creditor meetings, 80 people. We've told them at 2 of these meetings orally. We've put it in writing to every single one of them. Bill sent an email to every one of them saying exactly that. If we wait 18 months, if you'll wait 18 months, you can keep the money and the IRS cannot get it. And now we find out that was bad tax advice. And what do we do with that? And how do we protect it? We advised Becky to wait the full 18 months. There was a little bit more security if we waited that 18 months before we paid folks back, and we advised her. And Becky is, if you haven't figured it out yet, Becky is a type A person on steroids. Becky Becky would have nothing to do with it at all. She said, there's no reason to wait. There's no added protection to these creditors. We're going to pay the money back. And Bill and I said, well, how are we going to explain this? We've known all these folks, you can't have it, and now we're going to call them and say, we're going to give it to you 9 months early. So we called another creditor meeting, and we just explained to them and told them the truth about what had transpired, and that Becky was adamant that we pay the money back, and we pay the money back now, and that's what we did. It took a couple of months to prepare a very thorough release, as you might imagine, but we got it done, and those creditors received 100% of their principal money back well in advance of when we told them they would. We appreciate y'all's time so much for coming and sharing this time with us and supporting Becky. Becky's just a wonderful person, and she's a glowing example of if you do the right thing in life, good things happen to you. I'm sure you've got questions, and we want to give you some time back to ask those questions, and you can ask the question of all three of us. You can ask Becky a question, Bill a question, me a question, and we'll do our best to answer those. Yes, sir.
What was it like dealing with the responsibilities you had in your respective firms? You knew that you had all the responsibilities associated with her situation that you have to work out with your firm. Like, did you have to balance the priorities that you already had there?
You mean because it took so much time to represent her? Well, and that's a very good question. That's a great question. Busy trial lawyers are always busy. There is no downtime. There is always more to do than you can do. And so you just have to balance things. And in my situation at that time, I pushed some stuff off, and we were very busy. This was a very intense representation for several months, full time for all practical purposes. You guys can't be that shy. How long have y'all been in school? Different times? This is all 3 years?
So when I was here, we had I think it was called an ethics class, 1 hour ethics class. And the professor, I'll never forget it, showed us a movie called The Verdict, starring Paul Newman. If you haven't seen it, watch it. I've watched it. Before I started law school, I watched every lawyer movie that was ever made. But in that law school class, he asked us, I think he just didn't want to teach that day and just wanted to show a movie. But he asked us to watch this movie, and at the end of it, we were going to discuss all of the ethical issues that could be identified from that movie. And there were a bunch. This deal is kind of like that. When we were preparing to get ready to bring this to you, we thought, well, should we focus on this or that or whatever, or this, or what about that? And we just thought, there's so many. I mean, we had ethical issues all the time. Mark had a $2.5 million insurance policy through his company that paid out, that Becky wanted to throw into the mix to pay the creditors back. Now, this is during a time where we weren't sure exactly how much we were going to have or if we were going to have enough to pay the creditors. And remember that ethical issue I mentioned first and foremost, pay the creditors back, pay the creditors back. Our issue is, well, we also got to make sure you're taken care of. So we had to talk Becky into allowing us to go to the creditors to get permission to use that money so that she could eat. Or pay the attorneys, especially to pay the attorneys. But literally, that's all the money she had to do and sustain herself for the 18 months, 20 months, 21 months it took to get through this. And so Monty and I had to call a creditors meeting, or during one of the creditors meetings that we called, we brought that to the creditors and said, okay, now, did we actually have to ask the creditors for permission? No, We could have just taken it and done it. She was entitled to it. They weren't, she was. But because we knew we wanted to get to that end goal and we didn't want to light the fire to the gasoline and blow everything up, we went to them and said, we are asking you to let us do this so we can keep moving and keep this thing going. And they did. They did.
Oh my gosh. I mean, their legal mind's unbelievable. I mean, baffling. I mean, and they both were, you can see the two totally different personalities, and they balanced each other out perfectly. But like I said in the beginning, you saw the picture. Maybe I should flash back to my three wise men. But I mean, they were there for me personally. Bill I had known for a long time. I didn't know Monty that well. But I mean, we laughed. They were there. They were gentle and kind to me. And they had a lot of really hard stuff that they had to tell me. It was very complicated. We touched on it. And my son is here, John Luke. And I mean, they were amazing with our kids. I can't tell you, Monty would take John Luke out and take him hunting. And I mean, they just were more than attorneys. They were friends.
I will tell you as a friend, one of the ethical issues I guess you have to look at is when it's someone that walks into your office that you don't know, you can be a little more harsh in your legal advice than when it's a friend. But on the other hand, if it's your friend, you got to make sure that you're not too gentle when they need to hear the truth. And so there was a constant battle, or I guess cross pull on, okay, how do we do this so that I'm a lawyer and I'm representing the legal interests of my friend. And as I described, the first 2 months, I'm pretty sure the first 2 months, and then intermittently throughout after that, but it slacked up a bit. But for the first 2 months, every time I met with Becky, it was as if I put her up against the wall and took my fist and as hard as I could, punch her in the stomach with something that I had to tell her or something that I had to explain to her that was not good. Every day for 2 months, either me or Monty or both of us would have to hit her in the stomach with some bit of news that wasn't good. And so as a friend, that's tough. It's tougher. It's more difficult. But as a lawyer, you got to do your job. So we have to do that delicate balance. I will say, though, I don't mean to hog it, but I got to say something. The other lawyer, Johnny Sutton, made a statement during one of those times that I have never forgotten, and I have used it. I haven't given him credit for it all the time, but I've used it in so many occasions. And here's what he said. There was something that we had to explain to Becky that wasn't good, that she wanted to happen, that we could not make happen, and it wasn't good. And she was frustrated, and she was verbally frustrated, and she was visibly frustrated. And at some point, Johnny said, Becky, you're agonizing over something over which you have no control. Just let it go. And that concept hit me. I'm over there going, whoa, he meant it for her, but I remembered that statement like it was yesterday. So I use it all the time. You're agonizing over something over which you have no control. Don't do that. Doesn't do any good. So use it if you need it.
Any other questions? Yes.
we're going to have different answers here, so I'm going to go first. Since I was so adamant, my plan was whatever I could not pay back, that Mark's employer was going to pay back. And they knew it. And I mean, I made him go to them and promise me that. He's like, they're not going to agree to that. They're not going to agree to that. I was like, you've got to go. He goes, I'm not going to go. They're not going to agree. He did not speak to me. He finally did it, but he did not speak to me for 3 days until I took him a pound cake to his house and asked for forgiveness. But I was going to make sure everybody got paid back, and they didn't really always like my ideas. But anyway, Monty will probably say something different.
No, that's a fair answer.
It did have some interesting elements, though. Here's one, and here's one where this one went against the advice of her counsel, and I, as a third leg in the counsel, was like, guys, she's going to got to let her do what she's going to want to do. Just let her do it. There was one credit. What we did is we calculated what everybody was owed, subtracted any interest that they thought they might get, and just said, we'll give you your principal back, all right? Nothing else. There was this issue of clawback. I don't know if y'all know what that means, but someone who got their loan early and got their money and their interest, there's this thing where you say you can go back and get the extra money that they made and just get them back to their principal. And so we had several creditors like that, but we had one in particular where when we cancel out his profits that he had made, he was owed about $25,000. Well, this guy said, no, I'm owed $279,000. And we said, well, why? And he said, because I had two different entities, and those two different entities operated separately, and yada, yada, and so I'm owed $279, not $25. We had legal arguments that said he was wrong, but we thought, you know what? He actually, legally, it's doable. That's a doable deal. But it was cheesy. And she said, no, pay the man. Pay him. I don't want to see him 10 years from now and have him go, yeah, well, you paid everybody, but you didn't pay me. She said, pay him. So the probate lawyer, Jerry Jones, comes back to her one day and says, hey, Becky, I got him down to 275. And Becky said, what? He said, I got him down to 275. I don't think he ought to get that at all, but fine, we'll pay him 275. And she said, no, he's getting 279. 290. And Jerry goes, are you nuts? I mean, what are you doing? She goes, no, I want to make sure that everybody feels like they got paid. And I don't want him to feel like I cheated him out of $5,000. Not worth it. Pay him. So he did. But lawyers, I mean, you know, we try to help our clients, and Jerry literally thought he was helping her by knocking back a little bit on what this guy had to pay, because probably shouldn't have gotten the 279, but that's okay. And she said, no, I insist on not. Same lawyer, one day we were talking about Mark's credit card bills. He had credit card bills of $200,000. Jerry, probate and estate lawyer, he goes, look, we get these all the time, and typically your credit card companies will take 10 cents on the dollar and they'll be happy. They'll be happy. They'll be elated. So let's just pay them $20,000 and we're good to go. She goes, no. We didn't spend $20,000, we spent $200. Pay them the $200. He goes, Becky, they're not a creditor. They're not an individual. They get this. They do this all the time. She says, yeah, but I don't. Pay them the money. So ethical duty, he had the ethical duty to tell her what the general rule is when you settle a matter with the credit card company, and to try to help her with that, to know that she will have a little extra money to do some other things with. But this one was insistent on paying everybody, even the non-human people. And every time they would look at me and go, and I go, you gotta let her do what she's gonna do. And that was really more the friend coming out than the lawyer.
What a remarkable, compelling, heartrending story that we've heard today. Monty and Bill reached out to help Becky through this long passageway through a tragedy to redemption. We have dealt today with so many of the ethical aspects of this. Bill and Monty, they encountered a spider web, a tangle of ethical matters, even apart from the morass of substantive issues that characterize the unfolding of all that they did. They were able to accomplish what they did for Becky and for the children because of their character, because of their integrity, because of their reputation, because of their experience, and because of their servants' hearts. That's how they got it accomplished for Becky. I want you to remember what you have heard from these two Baylor lawyers, because they are paradigms of what every Baylor lawyer, what every lawyer, what every professional should be. It's not always the case. That's why you need to remember and you need to take to heart their message, because today you have met two of them. I want to point out something here. We have dealt with the ethical issues, the legal aspects. Certainly, Becky, thank you so much for sharing. The book, Awful Beautiful Life, deals with a dimension that we haven't heard so much about today, and that is Becky's faith journey, her emotional journey. You can imagine the emotions, the stress that Becky went through. She was going through a period in which she had to deal with grief. She had to deal, frankly, with fear. She had to deal with all sorts of stressors that were involved, because this was a media circus. She had to deal with broken friendships. She had to deal with that sense when she went out that everyone was looking at her. That's not an easy thing to go through. Very few people have to go through that as Becky did. Becky got through it because of her faith. And I want you to understand the book talks about the faith story, as well, of course, about what Bill and Monty have shared so articulately and beautifully in such detail with us about what it meant to represent Becky as a lawyer and as her friend. Awful Beautiful Life. Thank you so much for blessing us today, Becky and Monty and Bill. Bill and Monty, so proud of you. Baylor Lawyers, capital B, capital L, because it's not just a descriptor, it's a brand. It's a brand. Thank you for blessing us. Becky will be available out in the foyer area for autographing a book if you would like to buy it. I want to note that Becky has established a scholarship here at the law school at Baylor Law in honor of Bill and Monty. And the scholarship is funded by the proceeds from the sale of her book. Becky, thank you so much, and I can't think of a more appropriate way to honor Monty and Bill than as you have by making it possible to help a Baylor Law student make their way through Baylor Law. Thank you so much. And with that, we are adjourned.